Have you ever wondered why it is essential to have diversified medical illustrations in the healthcare community? You might also be wondering what this has to do with DEI. This illustrates the many facets of DEI and how to bridge those gaps. We are so excited to have you here with us today. This conversation has many of you buzzing for more. Thank you so much to all my loyal guests. We look forward to your feedbacks and comments. Please drop them in the chat. We look forward and hope that you will like this show. Please drop all your comments in the chat. We intend to respond to as many comments and questions from our audience as possible. This takes a great deal of effort on our part, so I'm eternally grateful to our loyal guests. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a DEI consultant and authoress of Emotional Intelligence, a toolkit for managing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The link to purchase the book will be in the comments. And for a living, I help organizations implement DEI plans to reframe their cultural mindsets through thought-provoking workshops and webinars. Join us as we share the different voices in the DEI space. I am so excited. Today with us is Chidebere Ibe, and I'm going to have him come live. He's live with us today. Hi, Chidebere, how are you? And thank you so much for coming today.
Hi, Richie. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. The pleasure is all mine. Can you tell the audience a little bit about you?
All right. I'm Chidebere Ibe because I know a lot of people have difficulty pronouncing my name. I'm a medical student and a medical illustrator, currently working with Harvard Medical School. I currently serve as the Chief Illustrator, Journal of Global Neurosurgery, and the Creative Director of the Young African Continental uh, Neurosurgeon Forum. And it is a pleasure to be here. I'm passionate about creating diverse illustrations and advocating for the underserved population through medical illustrations. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. Why do you think that skin color determines how we give and receive healthcare services?
Well, skin color actually determines, it is a determinant factor because if we look at the difference between humans, right, it is, from different races, different ethnic group, it is just a difference in skin tone, basically. But it's amazing how skin tone has become a yardstick to how we receive healthcare. Skin tone has become a determinant to who ought to receive healthcare, right? Has become a determinant to who healthcare is a privilege for and not just a right. So it has become a problem now, and it's amazing to know that from the history of diversity and inclusion, where people have always advocated for diversity, people had always been considering of race as a factor. But now let's look at skin as a factor also. Talking about in medically inclined, basically, we understand that as skin tone varies, right, so as some skin conditions or some diseases varies, or so as representation varies in this from these skin tones. And it's sad to say that basically not much has been done about representation of of medical in medical literature containing diseases, for example. Let's say let's take for example like psoriasis, for example, where psoriasis have a different representation on white skin than how represented on a black skin. And because of this difference in representation, most healthcare professionals, right, or medical students basically, do not have their experience on how to diagnose these skin conditions on the skin that do not look like them, basically. And it's a problem because if medical students are basically trained in medical school to be able to diagnose simple skin conditions, and yet the resources to training them are not very diverse enough, then it becomes a problem. So this way difference in skin, or this way skin the skin is has become a yardstick to how we receive healthcare, because basically our healthcare professionals are not used to seeing diverse skin tone while in medical school. And secondly, there is this, I would call it a cliche, where Black people are basically assumed to have high tolerance for pain, where the nerves ending are less sensitive to pain. So because of this particular implicit bias, right, there's a particular perspective that Black people are being seen, right? That, oh, if, for example, if you're a Black pregnant woman, right, you're assumed to, to have high resistance to pain, and of course, do not really need much of healthcare attention. This is how skin tone has affected how healthcare professionals or healthcare practitioners, provide or prefer healthcare services to the receiver. And also in terms of, where we generally see Black people as derogatory, where if you are black skin, you are, you do not deserve that attention. For example, I'll talk about the popular the test that was carried out, the black doll test, which the test was carried out some years ago to determine how Black people see themselves. The test was finally determined that Black people saw themselves in a very negative perspective, and it was then found or realized or then researched and said that Black people ought to see themselves, in a different perspective, so that we can, so that the world can see us also in a different perspective. So this is how skin condition, or this is how skin basically has affected healthcare, has affected how Black people, or not just Black people, but people of color generally receive healthcare. And because if you look at it critically, the Latinos are not represented in medical literature. They are not represented, and of course they ought to be represented. So it is very strange. Very superficial when people raise topics about representation of the Asians or the Latinos. People don't talk about it much. So when issues like these are being raised, people shrug off conversations like this. People say they're not important. This, of course, affects how this particular sort of people, receive healthcare.
Right. I saw I think it was a 3D model, an image you posted on LinkedIn, and it didn't even occur to me. It was the model had chicken pox, right? And
Monkeypox, actually.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, you said?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So the model that you had posted on LinkedIn had chicken pox, and I went back myself and I looked on YouTube to see how it appeared on a non-black person, and it was completely different. So the health outcome right there could be different in terms of the necessary diagnosis, or the diagnosis
Right.
that they might get,
Right.
or that we
I
might
totally
get.
agree with you. Yeah, because basically, there's something called the Fitzpatrick scale. So which simply says, I mean, it actually represents the skin tone from a light skin tone to a darker skin tone. So as due to the variation of the skin tone, so as the representation differs, right? So for example, on a white skin, where you would see some erythema on a white skin, you would see no erythema on the black skin, right? You rather see some white patch scaling or representation. And most time medical students will ask in Africa basically, how would they diagnose a black patient with heat rash? They said they're looking out for redness, right, on a black person, because that's all they also in medical textbook. But that was the wrong representation. That was the wrong diagnosis of how you represent or how you diagnose heat rash on a black person. So it is sad to say that our literature, and I mean, I know much effort is being put into that, but more can be done. We need to see how we can diversify representation, because these skin tones are different, so are the representation. And of course, it is very misleading to use a particular information to train medical students generally, right? It is I would say it is a wrong direction training medical students with just one information. So there is just so much to be done about representation in terms of skin conditions, basically.
Right. And you think, so so diversity in medical illustrations do improve healthcare outcomes.
Well, it definitely improved healthcare outcome. It definitely does, because as I earlier said, let's talk about statistics here. So, for example, research was carried out at the University of Pennsylvania that less than 5% of images in a medical textbook show Black people, right? And and if you go in depth on that data, you'd realize that that 5% or less than 5% is representing Africa, right, in a derogatory manner, right? Let's say, for example, diseases like marasmus, diseases like kwashiorkor. That's how us or STI. That's how Black people have been represented in most of these images, right? So that is not representation. That is not diversity, right? When we talk about diversity, right, it's about equal representation, right representation, what really it is, basically. So because if you look at marasmus, for example, or kwashiorkor, for example, it also affects Asia, for example. But you will not see most of these images of an Asian population with kwashiorkor, for example, right? So it is a problem. So and so the lack of representation or diversity in medical literature, in medical literature improve healthcare outcome, right? Because right, let's talk about the maternity ward, where Black women die more than Black pregnant women die more than white pregnant women, and that's because not much of representation has been done in the maternity ward, right? As I earlier said, if you're a Black mother, right, you are assumed to have high tolerance for pain, or if you are seeking for drugs, or if you're seeking for particular, you know, um, so painkillers, for example, you're assumed to just be another drug addict, basically. So this is just an outcome where lack of, visual creations have affected doctors' perspective towards a particular set of race, for example. And imagine in a doctor's office where, let's say, in a gynecologist office, where on the walls of the office are just images that show diverse people, black, like the black fetus, for example. This alone creates some set of worth and belonging, right? There are a lot of cases where a mother does not really feel confident enough to talk about her personal issues with a physician. But I feel that good representation, good visual representation, can of course bring some sort of confidence or trust between the doctor and physician, where the patient, right, rather the patient can confide in doctor, basically, and talk about his or her personal issue. So this is where creating diverse images can address, can improve our healthcare outcome. And of course, as earlier said, skin conditions is one of the topics that I always be talking about a lot of time, because there have been a lot of cases where patients has self-diagnosed themselves, right? Because, for example, if you go to a physician hospital, to a dermatologist, and he said he doesn't know much about this particular skin condition, you as a patient, you want to self-diagnose, right? You go to the internet, you look for images, you would not see images, right? So based on a patient perspective, you want to self-treat yourself, you seek for advice from where you shouldn't seek advice from. With this, you begin to take some drugs or some lotion that you ought not to take, and with these can counter effect, or can produce some counter reactions, and of course can worsen the healthcare outcome. But with good representation, so imagine the patient goes online and sees accurate representation of this skin condition, and he or she would have a basic knowledge, right, of what he or she is going through, and not just about having the knowledge, right, but the patient would also be involved in this our own healthcare, right? Because so imagine the patient has prior knowledge to about the skin condition that he or she has. So going to a dermatologist and he confirmed that, gives you more confidence that you are aware of your own disease or of your own skin condition. So with this particular scenario, we're going to see how our healthcare outcome begin to improve, because patients are involved, doctors are involved, and there is accurate representation of these diseases on in our medical literature or over the internet, and it creates a system where everybody feels valued and respected, valued and seen, because there are a lot of people out there that are not seen, right? They're not seen, but through visual creation, they can be seen. And of course, science have proven that one of the most powerful senses is a sense of sight, right? So if we're able to visually advocate for the underserved population, we can directly, right, improve healthy outcome of the underserved population.
You touched on a lot of good points, and on all those points, I have three stories, and it's very interesting that you mentioned representation. When I go to the pediatrician's office with my daughter, we often see all the pamphlets and flyers for allergies, for pulmonary diseases, skin ailments, and all of it is on white skin. And oftentimes, it's exactly what you said. I tend to do my own research and call doctors that are in my family so that, right? So that they can tell
Right.
me what this is. And s- my daughter had eczema for about 4 years. And I remember, because again, I'm constantly doing research, I always knew that cortisone in the long run can damage the kidneys. And that was one of the things that they wanted to give Sophia. And in in rejecting not rejecting the diagnosis, but in rejecting the treatment because I knew of its further effects down the road, I turned to a more naturalistic approach, which is also rejected in the healthcare community. And beyond the representation and the dialogue that I have oftentimes with physicians, it's I think at times what happens is that they're very it's hard to share the knowledge to have a more positive response from the doctor because of the, like you said, the lack of representation. I don't have enough trust to know that they can properly diagnose my daughter who's only 8. You see what I mean?
Right.
And in those instances, I think that there needs to be a complete overhaul then, from I see all the pharmaceutical companies and brand names when you go into the medical doctor's office, and it's not only representation in the medical illustrations, which is what we're talking about, but it's also representation in all the marketing.
Right.
It's all the marketing. And so as a parent, again, and you were shaking your head, I'll call my cousin in Orlando who has her own practice, or I'll call my aunt who's in Atlanta, Georgia, who also has her own practice. And I'm trying to figure out, the best way to find solutions or good health care outcomes for Sophia. And it's imperative, I think, to be able to have the medical representation to feel included, and so that the conversations will be different.
Right. I totally agree with you. And what this also does is that, right, it stirs up difficult conversations. Right. Before now, people don't talk about the representation. People were scared of telling their personal stories. People were scared, will my story be heard and respected? But you see, when you begin to create representation, begin to create visual representation of these images, people begin to share their personal stories. People begin to become very bold or courageous, to talk about their own experiences. So it of course takes a difficult conversation. And with this conversation, we can know that yes, there's a problem somewhere and we ought to fix it. And I would tell you basically, before now, there is this software I was using, which is a complete anatomy model. It's a model, 3D model that I shared on my social media. Before now, right, this model were all white images, right? We're all white 3D models on that software. But after a couple of weeks after my image went viral, I realized that the company had changed all their images, all their models to diverse models, to Asian, to Black people. That's because people started conversing about it. People started talking about representation. People started talking about how this was lacking so much in the system. Now, faculties, organizations, right, institutions begin to see this is a problem, and we need to work, together. We need to synergize to solve this problem. So it is amazing how this state of difficult conversations, and that's why we cannot overemphasize the importance of representation, because it is just how we can solve this global problem.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it's probably the only way to solve the global problem. There's I watched your TED Talk, and I want to I want you to shed some light on, the last time you saw that picture of your mom and why it was the worst day of your life and how it benefited you 10 it was I believe maybe 10 in 2011, how it benefited you
Uh,
from 2011 to now. Why it was the worst day, and then what did you learn from it, and what further changes do you want to make?
well, so you see, that was actually one of the worst day of my life, basically, and it's actually the defining moment of my life because what happened that day was that after all the incident happened where we lost her, I said to myself I was going to be a doctor. Right, this was going to be the reason why I wasn't going to give up on my dream to become a doctor, and I just kept pushing. I just kept pushing, and that's why I love healthcare that concern women and children. Healthcare that concern women and children. I'm so passionate about that, and but that shaped my idea because when my mom was alive, she was a very strong, amazing woman. She was a disciplinarian. She was powerful, I would say. So, but I mean, so we basically took life lightly when she was, alive. But when we lost her, we knew that we were just all on our own, right? I knew I was just on my own to plan my life. I was on my own to be independent. So that's where I had to take up the courage to push for my life, to become independent, to become, to begin to plan for myself. So I had to work, I had to learn so many skills. I had to just be that independent person. And that was just the moment where I realized that sometimes some bad things happen in our life just to make us, just to mold us to becoming who we're meant to be. And because of those moments in my life, I started seeing myself, being a person of value. I realized that, if I was going to become someone in life, I need to be a person of value. And in a way to make my mom proud, I had to work so hard to say, right, she's not alive to see me become a medical doctor, but I sure have to make her proud. I've always said this. I always said this. And my mom was a very spiritual person. She was a Christian. She loved God so much, and she would always pray for me. And I would say that my success, right, is attributed to her because she did amazing things in my life, particularly, and that's what led me to this point in my life. So that's what has always kept me going. And I also do this because I also don't want to see young people go through what I've gone through, where they have loved ones and they lose their loved ones, right? So I want to see how to be that voice in the healthcare to educate people, to help people in the healthcare service, where people can see, have good time with their loved ones, spend good time with their loved ones, and not lose them to negligence or lose them to where knowledge or education should have solved that problem, or to where good screening center should have solved those problems. So I want to see how to be that particular bridge, between lack of knowledge and experience. But I would say generally that has been a very defining moment in my life. From 2011 till now, I always, I mean, her memory is always so fresh in my mind, and that's what keeps me going because I have someone in heaven who's looking at me, and I'm working so hard to always make her proud.
Absolutely, you're walking in her footsteps.
Yeah, right,
And
definitely.
in God. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. There was another defining moment in your life was that organization that you worked pro bono for, and how uplifting was that experience?
Well, basically, actually, sometimes, with this thing that you say there's no harm in trying, right? Basically, I mean, I was like, okay, I mean, that was during lockdown, basically, where, lockdown, things were quite very, hard. I didn't have money, things were tough. And, but I was skillful, right? I had a couple of skills. I was talented, but I didn't have money. So that's where I reached out to this group, the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. And I said I wanted to do designs for them. And I received a prompt response that there was no money to pay. So I said I wanted to do pro bono for them. But that's why I met my mentor. He saw my artwork and said, why not go into medical illustrations? You know, well, that was part of the defining moment, right? Because it's one thing to suggest a thing, and one thing for me to take it up and to pursue and to drive with it, right? So because people sometimes receive advice, sometimes receive word of direction, but sometimes they did not take it up. Sometimes they did not move with it, right? But I had to just take it up, and the sad thing that I wasn't a medical student then, so I didn't know anatomy, I didn't know medicine, I didn't know much of those things. But I was willing to learn. I was willing to push myself and to grow. So I had to just started learning. I had to gather some old medical textbooks that a friend of mine gave me. I started reading them. I started trying my best, and then I had just a very old computer and a computer mouse. So you're basically using a computer mouse to learn, which is basically not possible. Like it's very difficult. But I think those were the stages where I began to understand that, understand what works for me as an artist or as an illustrator. Because basically there were no tutorials on YouTube that teaches illustration. So everything I learned was what I taught myself, basically. So while using those crude equipment, I began to see things from a different perspective. I began to imagine, I began to, use limited resources to breed creativity. So those were the defining moments in my life where I began to see things. So when I grew to become, recently I started getting better gadgets. They were basically like walkover, right? Because I started with some basic equipment. So of course, the bigger equipment wouldn't be of a big deal for me. So those were defining moments in my life. And sometimes I just look back and said, what if I didn't take that bold step to reach out to that group on Facebook? What if I did not reach out, right? What if I did not, overcome the fear of rejection? Because I was scared of like, okay, they're going to reject me. What's come to words? He doesn't know my face, so he doesn't know me basically. So that's more like a rejection. But what if I did not take those steps? And but luckily, and God willingly, I took those steps, and that's what, with good advice and good mentorship, and not just about mentorship, but I'm willing to learn and follow. That's what led me to this point. And it's always still a blessing, always still something to reckon on to.
Of course. And when did you know that your image was going to go viral?
Well, nobody knows it's gonna go viral actually. So basically, I did not know my email was gonna go viral. I never knew, and truth be told, I didn't want to go viral. Right, my happiness was just to do what I was doing, to share my work out there, just to do what I was passionate about. That was just what was my mind, right? But basically, I didn't know people could go viral for creating illustrations, right? And so I was just basically doing my little thing for my small space. And the day went viral, I was like, what's happening? I woke up in the morning, I was receiving emails from CNN, BBC. I was like, what's happening? What's this? And then I understood that this is just beyond illustration. Like this is just more of a piece of art that is a message to the world. Then it was amazing. Then I had to just embrace this new feeling, this new era. It was just a new lifestyle for me. Basically, things had changed. It was amazing. To be truthful, I didn't know it was going to go viral,
Mhm.
and it was just a surprise to me.
Right. And that also, your mom was a defining moment, the organization was a defining moment. Those are two defining moments. And this actually showed you which path that you needed to take.
Yes, and basically, sometimes we neglect those burning desires in our hearts. Before now, I've had a desire to be a doctor and also be an artist, right? But I didn't know that there's a field that I could combine these two together as a career, right? So, but after the image went viral, right? So for me, I was doing this illustration as a hobby. I loved it. I was creating them, and not just creating images. I was advocating with these images. But when the image went viral, I understood that this is not just a hobby, this is a calling, right? This is because nothing happens in thin air. Everything happens because it was ordained, it was programmed in the sands of time to happen. So when this happened, I realized this is what I was meant to do, this is what I was called to do. So I had to gather all energy, all resources, all education, and I had to start learning more. I had to become very intentional about what I was doing, basically. And I think that's what has just kept me going, and also, staying relevant in the field.
Absolutely. Oh, you're definitely staying relevant in the field.
Right.
It's relevant for all of us, absolutely, and we're
Right.
so thankful. Yeah, we are
Thank
so
you.
thankful.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
And what do you think, what can we do as change makers as we reach the top of the Diversity Connects Us Hour? What do you want us to do to support you? How can we how can we move on as change makers in in helping you with this amazing opportunity?
Well, first of all, I would say that this forum, right, this podcast right now, or this live right now, it is a support system. It is an opportunity, right? Because as I earlier said, when we begin to create these images, we are stirring up difficult conversations, right? Before now, you would rarely see a podcast or a live or an event that talk about why diverse images are important. I mean, they were not even there before now, but people are now talking about it. So this is a support system. This is because with these, people begin to see this, people begin to watch this video, people begin to understand this is a problem, and they begin to join the workforce. And I talk about it a lot that the work of representation is not just Chidebere based work alone, right? It becomes so difficult for me if I'm doing this alone. And most times people ask me, who are your audience? Who are your target audience? Most times there are basically artists out there, people who are also creative and who can also come together and begin to create these diverse images. Because I, I, I think I have a strategy that if we have more artists, all right, more medical illustrators who are focused on representation, who are focused on creating diverse images, we wouldn't be talking about lack of representation anymore in the nearest future because it would to become a norm in society because people now see that, oh yes, diverse images is common, right? In our medical textbook we have diverse images. Would they move on to bigger problems that we ought to solve? So the support system is that we need to come together as 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 a community of people, right? More of community building and less of competition. Because now we see that people are trying to create more black image, people are trying to compete, people are trying to drag me down, basically, but that's not the idea. The idea is when we synergize together, when we come together, we begin to solve it makes it very easy to solve this problem. So if we come together as a community of people who are passionate about this, right? I think it's more of a support to me basically because I feel that my happiness is when I see other black images out there. It's not about my images, right? It's not just about what I
Right.
create, but it's about what other people are also creating out there. And I will tell you basically, after my image went viral, many artists are already creating black images also, right? And I'm excited because that is the goal. Because with these, we're beginning to create a system where this is normalized and I can be more excited. I can be more excited to realize that we are driving this change. So for me, that's the most support system that I would need. It's not about the money. It's not about the opportunities. It's not about the travel opportunities. But it's about what we can do together as a system, or we can do together as a community. Because as I earlier said, it's not about me. It's about the underserved population out there, and with good synergy, we can address this injustice in the system.
I agree. And that's what's going to bridge the gap between DEI and healthcare. That's amazing. And what's in store for you for the next year? What are your projects? Is there anything special that you want to talk about and that you want to share with
Right.
us?
Well, so basically, there are a lot of projects on the pipeline, a lot of projects. Some would be made public very soon. I can't disclose them yet,
No problem,
but
but I'm excited already.
yes. So I'm currently writing my own book. You know why representation matters in medicine. It's gonna be mind blowing. I promise you that actually. Yeah. It is actually, so one of my goals actually this subsequent years is to see how to um, produce more of Chidebere EB, right? Because leadership is about, producing more leaders, not just more followers, right? So I'm seeing how to see. So when I go to medical school and I resume school, I would start a campaign where we begin to train some artists, train medical illustrators. With these, we can create a system where people, where we have a lot of medical illustrators where we
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of artists, where we have people more of Chidebere Bays, and we are driving this narrative, we are driving this change so passionately, and that's just my idea. And for me, I don't want to do much, right? I don't want to be so. I don't want to be everywhere. I don't want to just do many. I don't want to see how to change life, how to impact people, how to change the world, basically. And that is true human development. That is true developing young people because I started a foundation which is Championing Change Africa, which is an initiative to encourage young people because young people have passion, young people have desire, have dream, but they do not have the mentorship, they do not have the experience, they do not have that guidance, and that is where people like us need to be bridged, need to stand the gap to educate people. So that is my long-term goal. That is my vision, and it is scary, but it can be done. And in the long run, I'm looking to starting a school of medical illustration in Africa, and I hope that is possible. But we are keeping the flag, you know, up there, and we hope that is very possible in the near future. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like it's going to be Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all these celebrations for you to come. I wish you the best of all successes in walking in your mom's light and enjoying everything that you're doing because it's phenomenal. I applaud all your projects. I always believe when you have a dream and you have a mentor and you have a support system, anything can happen.
Right. Anything can happen.
Anything.
And you have God. You have God. You don't inside God, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. This podcast highlights lived experiences of inspirational stories of strength and tenacity. We share profound and courageous dialogues that influence DEI and emotional intelligence by breaking the barriers and labels of stereotypes, offering and confronting biases, and offering best practices to achieve a more and significant cultural mindset. Stay tuned as we continue to share our voices in the DEI space. To trend with us, hashtag diversity connects us.